Hello and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Smith, and look, let's just gloss over my absence for the last 2 weeks. I do apologise. I've got a few things in the pipeline. A few more things didn't quite go as planned. I hope you had a lovely Easter, probably a little bit better than I did. I hope you had a great Anzac Day long weekend. Come and join me for the design brief. This is episode number 51. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to jump into the design brief segment, and I have with me on the line who I'm going to call my resident golf course architect, who's currently president of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects and heads out his own design firm, being Kruse Golf. Welcome to Harley Kruse.
Hey, Steve. Thank you for having me on.
Mate, thanks for coming back on. It has been a little while, and you've been a very busy man. And I think when we last caught up, you were in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney doing some work up there at Blackheath Golf Club with a stage of work there that I think you're now finished up with that particular stage. Is that right?
Yeah, stage one's done. Unfortunately, of course, it's been a wet summer, and the golf course has copped, like all golf courses in Sydney, it's copped a really tough go in the sense that things just haven't dried out, even out of winter at Blackheath. They've never had a proper drying out stage, so it's been a bit tough for them there in the sense that it's been hard to get on and have a lot of play. And there's a club that relies on the golfing dollar to move it along, and particularly visitors. So hopefully things can dry out soon, and we might get a drier autumn through winter for Blackheath, but they're not alone. I mean, nearly every golf course on heavy soils around Sydney has been closed for probably a longest period of time in living memory, I guess, for a lot of them. And even the sand-based courses have had wet areas and the water table really high and haven't been able to drain, and have had casual water. So
that's right.
It's been a bit. I mean, I even know people have literally bought tickets to Victoria or Queensland to go and play golf because they haven't been able to play golf here in Sydney.
Mate, it's been extreme. We know it's been extreme from Sydney even from the south coast of New South Wales all the way up to the southeastern Queensland. And like you say, Blackheath is a local hollow there, a local valley. It does get a lot of water. It gets a lot of recharge. It's known as the course with the biggest water supply in general in the Blue Mountains. So they have had a tough time. Like I still talk to a lot of the people in the Blue Mountains, and all the courses are the same up there. They're all dealing with that, trying to get a bit of heat, trying to get a bit of sun, a little bit less rain. So it's been tough for a lot of people, but you've been moving around in other parts of the country. Let's talk a little bit about some of these other places that you're doing work. And I know that there's one. We'll start with the ACT down there at Gold Creek.
Yeah, doing a little bit of stuff at Gold Creek. There, the course was, I guess, built in the 90s. It's on lots of land, and it was a sort of a golf and real estate development at the time. It's got a new owner. When I say new owner, I think they've owned it for quite a few years now. But it's sitting there, a lot of land around it. The golf course is a bit tired and a bit worn out in parts. And they're looking at sort of an overall course improvements master plan, but also there was extra sort of developer land. So they're actually master planning the central facility. So the idea there is to make the central facility golf, accommodation, sort of more of a sort of country club facilities, and some additional accommodation in that area, sort of housing type accommodation in parts of it. So I think, so there's a bit of a new injection of things into Gold Creek, and it's, the bones of it's pretty good in the sense that it's, big with lots of room and well laid out. And one of the things there, again, an old golf course where years of siltation of things. There's been bunkers wash and a bit of siltation and some of the bunker drainage block up. So that, there's a program of redoing things out in the golf course to improve the bunkering and improve greens, improve the overall condition of it.
That sounds like it's a pretty significant move in a specific direction for, like you said, the club as a whole, and maybe making themselves, I suppose, a little bit more of a destination of people, with accommodation and the like. People can come and stay and visit and play, obviously. I know Superintendent Simon Steddon there, and I hope to have him on another segment of the podcast, be Keeper of the Greens, hopefully in the coming months. We'll see how that goes. But he's rubbing his hands together at this opportunity. I know he's done a great job in the time that he's been working there over the last sort of 5 or so years that he's been there, and obviously having you on board now, that rejuvenates people. It gets the club excited. There's a lot of things to think about and positive things for the club moving forward with this sort of work happening in the background before they actually physically say yes to a direction.
Yeah. No, well, they've got the course improvements plan is a bit different to other courses. The course is owned by a development company, not owned by a committee and a board and a group of members. It's privately owned, but there are members. So there's members to bring along for the ride. There is the commercial aspect of the whole operation, and I guess too, Canberra's growing in a big way. Canberra's actually running out of land and developable land, and running out and rental properties are hard to get. So it's actually got you've been in Canberra. You've got a high demographically. You've got a fairly high average wage in Canberra, and there are quite a few golf courses. You could say in a way it's a bit of an oversupply, but I think with COVID and things and moving forward, next to 5 to 10 years, there may not be an oversupply of golf anymore. So that's where Gold Creek sits in a nice spot and ready for the upgrade.
And Canberra, the ACT has always been a good destination for golf. There's plenty of golf courses to get on there and play, and Gold Creek's up in the sort of the northwestern suburbs of the outskirts of Canberra, there away from the city centre itself. And like you said, a great opportunity there for them to harness something more. And as Canberra sort of continues to grow, I think it's a great opportunity and great things happening there with you on board there, which is fantastic to see. Tell us a little bit about some of the other places that you've been travelling to. I know we were talking not long ago that you tripped down to Melbourne. Been anything happening down that way?
Well, yeah, there's a bit going on. We've got things going on in Brisbane and Melbourne and also in Perth. Look, Melbourne, Commonwealth Golf Club finishing off a project there to revitalise their lake between the 16th hole and the 3rd hole, which got mucked around with for a women's tournament for TV years ago, and I think the TV guys wanted to see more water and less wetland, so they put a couple of excavators in there and sort of mucked around with the lake. Well, we're actually restoring the lake now back to where it was prior as best we can, and redoing it and getting it ready for wetland planting and things like that, which has just started. And then Renaissance Golf are in at Commonwealth later this year for a sort of course upgrade works. But across the road, doing a vegetation master plan for Yarra Yarra Golf Club, which Renaissance Golf is also involved with. And that one is a fairly big canvas because they're through the process of the golf course improvements. They're taking a lot of the non-Indigenous exotic trees out, the poplars and the cedars and all the things that didn't belong have been taken out. The place has been given a whole breath of fresh air, and there's a lot of ground playing now to get in there with more of the traditional Melbourne sandbelt, native grasses and heath vegetation, and bring some of that back to Yarra Yarra and bring the course back to sort of that more sandbelt type character. But in the meantime, do some work around the edges of the place to sort of reduce the impacts of things outside the boundary with houses and roads and things like that. A lot of golf courses have fronting them. So yeah, Yarra's a good one, involved there with Mike Clayton. Obviously Mike's based in Melbourne, and working together on there. So we'll have it's a really nice project. Again, working alongside in parallel with what Renaissance Golf have done previously, and then what Renaissance Golf are going to be doing there in the future works. So that work there at Yarra, given the scale of the golf course, will take a number of years. It's probably 5 to 10 years of projects, just one by one as resources and time and cash flow allow. So but look, great blank canvas, and I think we can make a difference.
That's obviously one of the very well-known courses on the Sandbelt, and a lot of people have talked about it. It's a revered track in the country. We know it rates very, very well. These sorts of vegetation things, and you mentioned Renaissance doing work to the course design itself. These vegetation things are probably thought of as being very much around the edges, but it has a key impact on how courses are played and how they're viewed, doesn't it?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, it's 100%. It's the character. You obviously it's the lay of the land, topography, geography, and a lot of things give a course unique character. And ultimately, in terms of golf design, it's the shapes of the land and the width of the fairway and the way that things that the obviously greens design and construction and tees. That ultimately you combine that with the setting of the golf course, i.e. the sandiness and the vegetation and landscape is what gives obviously individual holes and the overall golf course its character and its style and its memorability. And in 2022, the vegetation also has a very important role for biodiversity in our suburbs and attracting wildlife. And we've got large scales of area where wildlife can thrive and survive and have habitat. So there's all sorts of benefits for members and biodiversity of a local area too. So that's where Yarra's heading, and it's really as I said, it's almost a blank canvas in some respects of what can be done there. So looking forward to that.
Exciting times for sure, for obviously for yourself and the team involved, and clearly the club and the membership, to see how that improves. And we've seen work done on other courses throughout the country with vegetation management and how that changes and what the possibilities there are. And I suppose Royal Sydney is one that you're part of that springs to mind as well, and in that type of work and what the possibilities can be, and getting a certain character back to the golf courses that's been slowly chipped away at from time, is how I look at it.
Yes, no, I mean it's a lot of we've got to remind us a lot of these mature existing golf courses. Yarra's been around since the 1920s. And a lot of the older courses, they were being planted in the 40s and the 50s. And for Royal Sydney, it had a lot of post World War II. It had in 1949 a generous member supported a tree planting program and bought, like every golf course at the time, bought what was easily and commercially available and things would grow. And they weren't necessarily local species. So typically it was forestry tree species and things that didn't necessarily belong, and whether it was just Pinus radiata or poplars or cedars or other things, depending whether you're in Sydney or Melbourne or even Perth. But these golf courses were planted simply with trees. The ground flora wasn't even considered an asset, and beautifying the course, inverted commas, was done by just planting what trees were commercially available. And a lot of the plantings were done, with a lot of good intent, but not necessarily in the right place or the right type. So that's the opportunity to sort of, with the older golf courses, a lot of their trees now are 50, 60, 70, 80 years plus old and over mature and heading into decline. Is, do you put the same tree back or do you put something more appropriate? So a lot of courses face, any golf course that's older than 50 years that's had trees planted, it's all got tree issues to deal with.
Yep, and there's plenty of those around. Exactly right, mate. Let's talk about the West Coast and the opportunities that you're involved with there.
Yeah, so we have Royal Perth as a client, but it's a Kruse Golf in collaboration with Clayton, DeVries and Pont, or CDP, it's as it's referred to. So that's Mike Clayton, Mike DeVries, and Frank Pont. Mike DeVries is American, obviously was involved with the routing and a fair amount of the shaping construction at Cape Wickham. Mike's also done a lot of work back in the States. You've got Frank Pont based in Europe, and you've got Mike Clayton based in Melbourne. So with Royal Perth Golf Club, we're actually collaborating. I was already in at the golf club looking at their vegetation side of things and also golf design and talking with the club and a bit further, and the opportunity came up to sort of discuss the idea of having sort of an international side of flavour, I guess, with the golf design. So basically, there's a direct collaboration between CDP and Kruse Golf. And recently, Mike Clayton, Mike DeVries, and myself went to Perth once the border opened up, and we've sort of been waiting in the wings, so to speak, until we're allowed to travel. But as soon as we could, we got over there recently and met with their new president and chairman of Greens and their new superintendent. When I say new, he's probably been had his feet under the desk there, or not on the desk actually. He's been out and doing lots with the team. Matt Souls, who's been there for 5 or 6 months now, who's very quickly making a lot of inroads and improvements to the golf course. So yes, we're doing a full golf course master plan and vegetation master plan for Royal Perth.
That's going to be pretty exciting for the West Coast, if I'm being honest, for the West Coast of Australia and for Perth. I mean, you talked about Matthew Souls. Listeners to my podcast know that I interviewed Matthew in Keeper of the Green segment there a couple of months ago. Great young guy, in great stead to take the reins of a place like Royal Perth, and coming from Sydney base, climbing the ranks, doing work at the Aussie and the like and other courses, now at the helm of a place like Royal Perth. We've got you guys in collaboration, Kruse Golf and CDP. There's some great minds that are there to put a master plan together for Royal Perth. This is really exciting from where I sit, hearing about new superintendent's appointment, a guy with fresh ideas, wants to bring out the absolute best in the golf course and make it number one in the West, and certainly as high as possible in the country. You've got 4 great minds, if you like, in CDP and yourself, and a club that clearly has said, let's do this. We want to make ourselves the best. I mean, there's a lot to look forward to here, and there's probably a little bit on the line too, as well, without putting any pressure on you. I mean, what's the site like? I've not been to Perth for golf, so I don't know it. Can you tell us a bit about what bones you got to play with?
Well, I guess first thing is just to sort of, I guess, set things a little straight. The club doesn't have ambitions to be the best golf course. It understands its limitations. So the limitations of Royal Perth as a golf course, I mean, Lake Karrinyup, the Alec Russell design course, and of course Alec Russell was, maybe listeners would know, also designed Yarra Yarra and the east course of Royal Melbourne. Yarra Yarra was the Russell design, and it's the best course over there by far. But Royal Perth wants to be a lot better than what it is, and within the limitations of its site. And the limitations of Royal Perth are the fact that it's 18 holes of golf on 34 hectares of land, which is not a lot. I mean, if you were to say to me, how much land do I need for a brand new 18-hole golf course? Well, I would tell you need about 80 to, this day and age, 80 to 85 hectares of land, what you typically would need on a gentle site to fit in 18 holes of golf. So, Perth's on half that. It's, the championship course at Royal Sydney is on 43 hectares, and Royal Perth, and that's tight, and Royal Perth's on 34. So it would be the thing is it's not going to be the number one course in the West, but can it be a lot better than what it is? Yes, it can. Will it be a lot better than what it is? Yes, it will. And we can make some really good golf holes out of what's there. It's on sand. I mean, like majority or virtually all West Australian golf courses, they're all on sand. And I guess if anything, WA being on sand should have far better golf courses probably than what it does. It sort of didn't quite get to the same, I guess, golfing IQ and golfing support that Melbourne had when it kicked things off with Mackenzie and Suter and others. Is Melbourne as a place for golf was driven in a different way. Perth didn't quite, it had the injection of Alec Russell, but the rest of WA, there's not a lot of great golf there, and yet it's all on sand. So getting back to Royal Perth, it's on sand, it's relatively flat, and where we can make a difference there is being so tight is to fix issues of internal safety within the golf course. You can imagine things are quite tight in certain places, and we can actually help and fix up some of those compression points of the golf course where things are close between holes and there are issues of potential danger and safety, and also some boundary issues where we can improve things around the boundary with safety and ultimately make the golf course a better place to play. And that's probably with, working with realigning the structure of the course in a few places to get better alignment of holes, and then looking at the holes and the green sites and the terrain. And because we're on sand, we can do interesting things like dig down and create negative space, and we can move things up a bit and all of a sudden get some interest on the ground plane, do 18 new green sites, and then introduce shorter grass around greens and get sort of tight rolls and bump and run type shots to their greens. And the greens are relatively small, so the ability to enlarge in greens and all those sort of things. So it can be, raw Perth can be really good, and it can be a lot better than what it is.
Well, that's great to hear, and look, I will say that any place that anyone works, so I'm just going to say it, that they'll always strive to be number one. Whether that's in the eyes of others is entirely up to each player. But I'm going to ask the question about grass types. Is that something that will be considered in part of this renovation or master planning concept for Raw Perth? Is that something that will be looked at?
100%. I think absolutely 100%. So it's effectively at the moment at Raw Perth Kaikuyu all round, and then the greens are pretty much a lot of power in them. They have been bent to a certain degree at some point. The intent would be to through the course upgrade works. And look, we've only made the initial visit, so even members aren't fully up to speed yet with where it's going. They all know that obviously we've been appointed and we're moving along, and there's a course improvements master plan coming. And one key thing for members is to improve the quality of the turf. And Matt's doing a great job with what he's got there at the moment, really good job, and members are very happy. But ultimately, we'd be like looking to get 18 new greens in a hardy bent grass. It's going to be suitable for the Perth conditions. And at the moment, as I said, we've got Kaikuyu fairways, which they will probably stay Kaikuyu because it effectively reduces the amount of roll off the tee of when the ball lands. So effectively it helps the course play a little bit longer because you're not going to get the roll that you do on Santa Ana. But where around the greens, and look, it maybe Santa Ana, might be something else, Cooch, most likely because there's a fair amount of sun. But if we have tight Cooch surrounds, and Matt's doing a great job even just tightening up the Kaikuyu that's there, but we get a tighter, finer leaf grass, i.e. Cooch, in the green surrounds, and can get that firmness in the green surrounds, and the bump and run and the bounce, then that'll bring a new dimension to play at Royal Perth, and it'll be part of the challenge and the fun and the interest of playing Royal Perth by a short game off tight fine turf instead of course Kaikuyu, which was the same situation at Kalara where they had Kaikuyu right up to small greens. So Royal Perth the same, probably rationalising some of the bunkering in time, and having relevant bunkers and maybe taking out some of the frustrating ones for the higher handicappers, but making sure the course can remain a good firm challenge, which it is for the better players. There's a lot of people in the WA are pretty fond of Royal Perth, and it's held events over the years, and so the idea is to keep it a good test of golf. And given like a lot of golf courses around the country, it's busy, and so with the busyness, the amount of play going through, we need to make sure we can make it safer and the golf traffic flow a bit better and get people from green to tee easier and not slow down play too much.
There's a lot there to think about for you to work with and bring out of the golf course, and I think that's the only reason I ask about the grass types is because knowing that it's Kaikuyu in the bulk of the golf course as it stands today, but you talked about the idea of maybe bringing in a finer leaf turf, a different Cooch potentially, or something on the green surrounds. And you mentioned that's been done at Kalara, which you were part of in terms of the redesigning of the greens, the golf course there, and the greens renovations program. And they've got Zoysia in their approaches and around their green surrounds. I know that Renaissance Golf did something of similar version at Concord when it was redone by them a number of 5 years ago or so. They've got Kikuyu everywhere on the golf course at Concord, and they brought Santa Ana in for their, I think, 40-metre approaches in, and then all of their green surrounds to what I considered to be a great improvement on the ground game that really opened that up and brought that into your golf at Concord. And I think if that is something that gets considered for Royal Perth, I think that would be a great change and bringing that element in. That's my personal view. I don't know how it's going to go and the discussions that'll be had, but I think that'll be a great improvement. And I know, speaking with Matt, I think they're doing trials at the moment over there in different bent grass types to see what's going to perform the best locally on site for the golf course. And they're the things that they'll do their due diligence and see which ones perform the best in dry, in heat, and in cold, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot going on already in the background thinking about this plan moving forward. And I think it's pretty, like I said, I go back to being very exciting for the West. So I think it's great.
Oh, look, there's the West is, as I said, the West has got courses on sand, and I think there's a genuine, a lot of them are getting, there's work getting done over there improving them. Obviously, Lake Carrion did a major course upgrade improvement works, which OCCM at the time were involved, and that's delivered them a far better course than before, and so that's been very successful, and there's other things going on over there. So, and Royal Perth hasn't done much. It's been Terry Gale's been consulting for the club and done a pretty good job for the last 25 years. And Terry's been a member there for a long time. But there's other works that I've heard going on that I've spoken with Terry, and I've walked the golf course together, and he was sort of. That job was passed on to him via Peter Thompson 25 years ago when Terry's based in the West, and I think Peter and Michael Woolridge at the time felt that Terry could beam there, could do bits and pieces with the course over the years, and that's what he's done over the last 25 years, and he's done a pretty good job with the resources they have. But I think now obviously with the new superintendent and a fresh look at things, and obviously the club seeing what Karrinyup has done and seeing what a few other places have done, that's where we've obviously landed the job. And look, we're looking forward to it. It is a small place, but I because it's small, every millimetre of Royal Perth is critical, and you can't move one way or the other without impacting something else. So that's where we've got to spend a lot of time being careful to get things right, which we will. Hopefully, and look, we've got to balance up, the fact that there's a golf course also. They've got planted a lot of trees in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which some of them are going to be a little problematic for us. And we're going to try and keep as many as we can, but also revegetate other areas and bring back some diversity. So, look, good project, good club, and we're looking forward to making a difference. And these things will take some time. They don't get changed overnight. It'll be a few steps at a time. They're often, in doing this sort of work, it typically involves looking at modifying or potentially, a new irrigation system. I mean, I guess for a lot of superintendents around the country that do have irrigation systems that 10, 20 years or older, all have irrigation system at the top of their list. Look, some tweaks and adjustments there, no doubt.
Very good, mate. Laugh there when you talk about small sizes of golf course, and this is just coming from me because my course at Katoomba was 29 hectares, so with 18 holes. So if that's anything to go by, I know what small is, and that's considerably larger than what I had.
It's probably what didn't survive. It's probably, you think about it, it's ridiculous to think that 18 holes on 29 hectares, and basically Chatswood Golf Club's, is 18 holes on 26 hectares, and it doesn't work. I mean,
look, it's probably going to lead into where I was going to bring this up anyway. But I agree with you that, and that's a bit of the modern game. In 1923, when Katoomba was first sort of thought of, and it was finished in 25, and it was only a 9-hole golf course before they expanded it. That probably worked when you were hitting the ball 180 yards.
Sure.
But today you're hitting it twice that distance.
Well, yeah, and then, yeah. Look, people are hitting it longer, they're hitting it wider, and the game is different. But these golf courses are laid out in a humble way, and but even then, your better A grade golf courses were already using, they were, Kingston Heath was always considered a small golf course in Melbourne, but and it's small as others. But yes, your golf courses on 150 acres 50 years ago, they're challenged. I mean, the Royal Sydney's challenged too, and it'll be a good championship layout, but it's tight. It's tight in places. So
it is tight. It is tight. But we'll get into that. Have you got any other work going on? Did you mention Brisbane before?
Yeah, doing some work in Brisbane, and doing work in Brisbane, and obviously Vietnam.
Where overseas? Have you had a chance to go overseas yet?
I'm meant to be on a plane to Vietnam tomorrow. Excuse me. But my electronic visa, was meant to be done by Friday, and it hasn't happened yet because of their system's all a bit slow. So they're probably flying on Tuesday.
Right. So there's a bit of work over there in Vietnam. You're all over, but you're busy. There's plenty on, which is great, mate. That's good to see. I like to hear it. Now, look, this topic of discussion that I wanted to bring up to talk with you about, and that's a little bit what we just mentioned, is these golf courses at the distance of golf at the moment. Look, everyone's talking about it, and it sort of jumps back up to me almost every year in April when we see Augusta, because some parts they renovate Augusta every time. Every year they go through a lot of work, and they do minor changes and some big changes. They're often lengthening tees a little bit more every time. And one of them, I can't remember if it's, I think, a 13th. I think they've gone back into the neighbouring Augusta Golf Club and taken some of their land, and they've made the hole, that much longer again. I mean, when you are going to a place like Royal Perth that you talk about small and you're renovating for essentially, I suppose, still a modern game, what sort of challenges do you have to think about the modern game when you're doing that? I mean, how does a golf course stay relevant?
Well, I think at the end of the day, yes, Augusta's tinkered with for one reason. That's a tournament they hold once a year with the world's best players. I mean, the average golf course doesn't have the world's best players playing it day to day. So we've got to work, think back to the reality of member play. And yes, the average golfer is hitting it a bit further today than 20 or 30 years ago. But I think the reality is good golf. Long doesn't equal good, and long doesn't necessarily equal good golf course design. So at the moment, you can have short courses and they're par 72, for example, and maybe they shouldn't be par 72. Maybe they should be par 70 or 71, and they could be 6,200 yards long. There's plenty of golf courses that are not long that are still great fun and still a great challenge, and are relevant. So again, Clara can't be any longer than what it is. It is landlocked by the boundaries it's got. Royal Melbourne can't be any longer than it is, and yet the world's best players want to play the composite course at Royal Melbourne in any tournament that's ever held there because of its architecture and the way it's been designed. And the trouble is, a lot of golf clubs just think, we'll make it harder by making it longer, but they actually don't look at the rest of the golf holes necessarily, and look at other ways of improving it and making the golf course more challenging and more fun. People, if golf clubs followed, did what the PGA did at times where everything gets made longer and made narrower, well, it just ends up being boring golf, and sort of, you don't have to think your way around the course too much, and it's just a bit of a brute. And I think the average, and that's not fun. So I mean, the game should be fun and interesting, and therefore we don't need to be hung up necessarily with length. There's plenty of golf courses around. I've had this discussion with Mike Clayton, and he's over in England at the moment, and there's plenty of golf courses around London that are sort of 6,000 yards, but they're a lot of fun and very challenging, and it's not about length.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up the way that you did by saying that longer doesn't necessarily equal better, and more often than not, it doesn't. And I've worked in clubs and I've worked in Western Sydney, and I know a number of people that are committee members on clubs or that are regular players at golf courses, and I don't know if it's a lack of, I don't want to be rude to anyone and say it's a lack of knowledge and understanding, but maybe it's a lack of experience and not playing around other golf courses to see what else there is, what architecture equals to golf, what good architecture equals to golf. Because the first thing that often jumps into people's heads, and I've been there, I've been in the meetings to hear it, is let's move that tee back. Straight away, the first thing, if we're going to do anything, that tee can go back 30 metres. That can make the hole longer. Therefore, it's harder. Therefore, it's better. And that's not what happens, is it? Always.
Well, yeah, you could even argue that some holes would be better if they were made shorter. You've got. I've watched a few and been involved with a few, and again, with all respect to those who are playing these courses week in, week out, but I've seen a regional golf course where the weekly men's comp, Tuesdays and Saturdays, and everyone wants to be off the back tee, and the further back you go, the less chance you've got of reaching the fairway bunkers right on the drive. And in many respects, for those players who are playing it in week in, week out in these comps, if they play it off forward tees, dare I say it, off the guest tees or even off the most forward tees, all of a sudden they'd be hitting their ball. They'd have to take the bunkers in consideration. They'd have to think about where they place their tee shot. And I'd almost guarantee that the scores wouldn't necessarily go down if they put the tees forward. So I guess, we all know that it's golf and the way courses are going to be operated or are being operated now, where we're gender neutral tees and mixing things around a bit and being able to play off different tees. People find that when they go further forward, all of a sudden, as I said before, you'll be reaching the hazards, reaching the bunkers that are sort of designed, that off the championship tee, they're 250 metres off the tee, but these guys can't reach them. So bring the tee forward, and all of a sudden they're in place. So there's a thought that playing shorter might actually make the golf course a bit harder for the average player.
Well, and again, I can only say I've never had this conversation with you about this type of thing, so I'm glad it's here on the podcast so other people can hear it. I agree with you 100%, and the other reason I say that is because I've had a directive during my time when I was superintendent. I had a directive because I used to like to move the markers around to give players a different experience and play a different golf course than the same one all the time at my time at Katoomba, and I was given a directive not to put the markers down the front because they didn't know what to do from down there. That was the whole thing. That they had to then make decisions, the players that they would never have had to make if they play from the back of the usual tees where they always played from. Because, like you said, other things come into play. And it's not necessarily, what I found was not necessarily just a bunker or a different tree or whatever. It was that they then had a different, say it was a par 4, a different second shot in. It might not have been 120 metres. It might have been 80. And they didn't know what to play from those distances. So I found that it created a different challenge and people didn't know what to do. It was almost like they were a little lost.
Well, I think that having flexibility of length of tees is really good because, look, as you know from Turf World, it spreads the wear and tear of players on the tees. But again, if you had flexibility of length off the tee, the ability to move, if you take 18 holes, for example, where you've got 6, 6, and 6, you could put on a given day, you could have 6 tees, well forward for the average. I'm just talking the average competition, well forward of what people are used to. You could have six markers set up sort of roughly in the middle and 6, right back. And move it around week to week so that, week to week, you're not walking off one green and going to the next tee and playing within 5 metres of where you played for the last 50 weeks. It's pretty boring. But if you walk off the green and move to the next tee and all of a sudden, you're back, or you're way forward, it's like, what am I going to... So you've all of a sudden got to start thinking about what club I'm going to use here, where I'm going to land, and mixing it up rather than being in the same 5 meters week in, week out, which is not so interesting. And I guess that's one thing, one dimension that'll be brought to Royal Sydney Golf Club with the Gil Hance design is and this is a key point of making Royal Sydney relevant in the future, is having longer stretched out tees and the flexibility of tee settings to make the course interesting. And Gil himself said, I'm looking forward to playing this Royal Sydney Championship course off the forward tee, because it'll bring a lot of the hazards in reach and in play. It'll be a lot more interesting off the forward tees for the average, but as he said, than playing way off the back. And again, that's also a bit of a philosophy that we're bringing to Royal Perth, is having this flexibility of longer stretched out tees that allow the markers to be moved around. And that's within a tight site, getting more interest and more fun out of a tight site by having the ability to move things around. So I guess it's breaking the habits. It's sometimes difficult to do where people are just used to playing off the same spot week in, week out. But I mean, I've even thought that one golf club I'm involved with is have a fun comp once a year where everybody plays off the very forward tee and gets to play it from there and see what it's like. And I'm interested to see whether the scores came way down or not.
It makes me smile every time I hear an expert in their field in certainly golf architecture or greenkeeping or whatever, and how golf courses are built, set up, and arranged. That you hear people talk about the challenge of it being forward, because I think the average golfer, that's not their first thought, and I don't know that they've often tried it to see what that's like. And my personal opinion that golf is enjoyable when you have choice. It's enjoyable. The challenge is in making the right decision and dealing with the results of that decision. And I think, and this is just me speaking, I think that when you go to a golf course, and if you've played it before, to go there and play it again with having slightly different choices makes it an enjoyable exercise again, just the same. It's not one fixed thing that you've got to try and conquer every time. It's a different experience.
Yeah, well, I've seen a regional golf course where I said they play off every Tuesday and Saturday competition. They're playing off the back tees week in, week out. And I've watched some of the senior golfers who are playing in that comp. They can't even reach the fairway off the tee. And so that just must be beating themselves up every time they play. And I think the problem there is if it just gets harder and harder for them because they're playing off the back tees in a comp, because that's where they think they should be, and that's where they're putting the comp week in, week out. Well, the risk for some of the golf clubs are as people get to the point where they're not hitting the ball as far, and then they're sort of struggling. Eventually, it's going to get too hard. And they're going to say, you know what, this is too hard, and they'll stop playing. So I think the relevance of moving things around and mixing it up a bit is creating that interest and keeping things fun and interesting for a great, it's a bit cliche, but a great range of golfing ability. And so some of those who aren't quite hitting as long as they used to can still enjoy the golf course.
Here's a question for you, and I don't know, I'm curious to know how this one will be answered and what your thoughts are. Do you think, and you're talking to clubs, you're talking to boards, committees, general managers, presidents, captains, the whole gamut of people that are involved in the decision-making process of changes and adjustments to their golf course, do you think that boards and those people making the decisions are open to that point of view, that it's not just about lengthening a golf? Do you think they're open to educating their membership, or do you think they're open to that thought process?
Oh, look, I think there's a lot more knowledge out about there now for with golf architecture information and knowledge, available and to be able to be seen and read on various different websites and things. I think there's a greater understanding of golf architecture. I think that, could there be a more greater message? Of course, there always can be. But I think boards, those clubs that have engaged course architects to help them with course improvements plans, and quite a few have right around the country. I'm sure these discussions are happening with many different clubs, and where they're landlocked and haven't got enough room to make things any longer, but they're looking at improving their golf, improving their turf, improving their architecture, another subject in itself, for example, is bunkering and bunkers. They're expensive items to have out there and take up a lot of man hours. But I think so. I think there's a lot more knowledge, a lot more discussion around course architecture and setup than ever before. Obviously, gender neutral tees has been driven as a standard, and I think what happens is as things do move forwards and people start to see, and people are traveling a lot and playing different golf courses, if they can see some of these golf clubs which have taken the course in a bit of different direction, and maybe you could call it an initiative around some of these things, and people see it and bring that process back to their own club. So I think we're going to see some good positive change, and I think over the next 5 or 10 years, and obviously the events of the past 2 years, golf courses have become really busy. And with the busyness, golf courses that may have been designed for 30 to 40,000 rounds a year are doing 50 to 60,000 rounds a year. So there's a lot of pressure on the golf courses and the facilities that issues of speed of play and wear and tear and maintenance and all those things come into it. And as I said, making the course relevant for a full wide range of age. One of my pet subjects at the moment is that people in golf clubs, people in general, are living longer and they're playing golf longer. I think last year there was 4 golfers at different clubs in Australia that turned 100 who still play some sort of golf, so with that, but they're not hitting the ball 200 metres down the fairway. They might be knocking it at 120 to 150 metres, but they're still out there playing golf. So we need to be at the facilities of golf need to be relevant from a young junior at the age of 7 or 8 through to someone who's 88 or even 98. So that, that's the beauty of the game of golf, isn't it? It is a lifetime sport and lifetime activity. So we need to be thinking about all levels and all ages and all abilities. Those who don't hit it so far versus the young guns who bomb it a mile. And young guns who bomb it a mile, when they're hitting it 300 plus yards, it's getting difficult to design for some of the facilities for those guys. But anyway, it's making it relevant across various different abilities.
But I'm excited by, personally, I love the thought process of clubs thinking about good architecture and new architecture. And you talked about that there's more knowledge out there, and gender neutral tees. I've talked about that since my time was working on golf courses, that it should nearly be skill level based. When people visit, they can choose where they want to pick from. Why should the back tees or be for members only, and why should the forward tees more often than not be for ladies only? I don't think any of that is relevant. It never has been, in my opinion. Yeah. But that's how clubs have thought about themselves for a long time, and I think you can have as much fun from the back as you can from the front. It's still a challenge. Golf is not easy. If anyone can tell me golf's easy from the front, I'll eat my hat. There you go. I think it's ridiculous. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, and this comes from a greenkeeping perspective, and it affects all golf. I've often wondered what someone in your position, a golf course architect, you design golf courses to be played and experienced a certain way. And a part of that is there's the turf surfaces and the speed of those surfaces, be it golf greens, be it the fairways, whatever. And we often talk about greens and the speeds, but is there a part of when golf courses ask you to look at them, to do master planning, is there some sort of thought process that if a green is set up by the club in 5 years' time, when you're well and truly gone, or 10 years' time, that they will be too fast for a particular design? Is that? I think golf courses are getting too fast. I think there's always pressure on superintendent. Again, I've been there and had it, to make them quicker. They're not fast enough. They're too slow. I very, very rarely did I ever get told they were too fast, but that did happen. But is that something that you're seeing as time goes on, do you think golf courses are getting too fast? I think so. That's my opinion.
I don't know. Look, I think some comments around speed is the modern bent grass varieties. We're talking bent greens here, and even the same in warm season climates where you've got Cooch or Bermuda type greens. But modern bent varieties and modern mowing machinery, can get greens super quick and super fast, as we know. So that's all doable. The question, as a course architect, slopes are designed in the greens and we all know that sort of, at championship time of the year that things get mowed a bit tighter and a bit quicker and a bit faster, and obviously tournament golf drives speed of greens. But I sometimes, the question is, with the ability to get these greens super quick, and tournament golf sort of showing the way that's what can happen in a tournament at, say that again on the composite course of Royal Melbourne President's Cup. The greens are super quick, but is that where greens should be for week in week out play at club golf level? Obviously not. And the pressure on the greenkeepers, as you say, to have greens super fast. I mean, I saw something recently which was statistics on the ball roll and the stimp meters of well-known tournament courses in the US back in the 70s, and things were slower than 8 on the stimp meter. So technology.
That's what I'm getting at. That's a part of my question to you. Yeah.
So technology allows superintendents to get the greens really quick if they want to. But the thing is, of course, as you know, we can do all that. There's a lot more pressure on the turf to achieve it. There's a lot more pressure on the green staff to do it. But the reality is, does the golf club need that? Part of my philosophy is you see this pursuit of speed, but one critical factor that's, and I guess very much part of, say, Melbourne Sandbelt golf is not just speed alone, but firmness. So my personal preference is I'd rather see firmness over speed. And, if things were 9 or 10 on the stint meter, but really firm, I'd rather see that solution than having things 13 on or 12 or 11 on the stint meter and soft. So
now that's a very interesting philosophy, mate. I'll be honest, because that's something very seldom I hear anyone mention. Is that combo?
It is part of some of that, more because it is easy to achieve, perhaps, in the climate of Melbourne. But certainly, part of Melbourne Sandbelt culture is that firmness and of greens, and that's about the ball bouncing on the greens on landing, not just being a soft green and the ball stopping. So, and part of defence of shorter courses is to have that firmness of not only the putting surface but the green surround, so the ball tends to bounce more. And I love that style of golf, and I guess it's more that bump and run sort of firm, drier conditions that you might see on a good summer of Scottish or British golf, where things are on sandy ground and there's a certain firmness. But certainly Melbourne Sandbelt drives that sort of firmness. I think it's harder to achieve in Sydney, but I would imagine that certain clubs could and course committees, green committees could sort of back off from the pressure on the superintendent of having to dial things up to 11 or 12 and bring them back to sort of 9 or 10. But look at ways of firming up their greens as part of the defence of the golf course and interesting play.
Well, it's absolutely possible to do. It might be trickier. That's like saying it's trickier to have a golf course green in Kalgoorlie, but they do it. It's something that's plausible to have a golf course at a place like Kalgoorlie that can be done, that's playable. They're playing the West Australian PGA there this week. Today's the last round. But it's when I say it's something that I seldom hear, all I've ever heard and all I ever hear from players is, pardon me, is that the greens were slow. I played over here the other day. Geez, they were slow. I tell you what, and I've been playing there for a while. They're slow. Or I was there the other day. They were slow. I've never really, and that's probably because I'm Sydney based. And you say it's different to Melbourne, it's different to Victoria. But if we were to ask our superintendents, if a golf club was to say, listen, we would love to see our greens a little bit firmer, and there's top dressing applications that you can go about doing that. And it all has an effect on how the greens profiles are and the age of the greens and what their makeup is and all those sorts of things, as I've talked about in the past. But I'm curious to know, and I'd love if there's any greenkeepers, committee members, board members, course owners, I'd love for someone to get in touch with me and say that they would love for their greens to be firmer and more bouncy, but not necessarily quicker at the same time, because that's a planned process to get that. And I've never heard anyone say that, and I'm really glad you did mention it that way.
Well, look, it is doable. I know, look, there are a few clubs doing it and talking about it in Sydney, and it is happening, and part of it too is the type of sand that the greens are constructed out of in the very first place, but also, even retro with existing greens is the change of management of the course and the culture. If you all of a sudden in the warmer months of the year when the grass is growing, if you've got to put 4 or 5 tons of sand out on your course every week, which I know a couple of courses that do that to give the firmness to the surrounds and the firmness to the greens, then do it. So there's a couple of courses in Sydney do it. I know Matt over back at Royal Perth, he's doing a lot of dusting of green approaches with sand and some mixing up with some heavier top dressings early on, I think, and renovation works and dusting of greens to, again, promoting healthy growth, but importantly, getting that firmness. So it's all doable. So and it's all, I think it's starting to happen a little bit more.
Again, and we talk about education, talk about knowledge in how golf courses are presented and how they're presented to play on, and all of it being filtered down, and that's through books, that's through talking to people, through podcasts like this, whatever. I think it's great stuff to see and hear about, and certainly the way you just talked about that with the speed of and the firmness of greens, I think it's something that I hope gets people. And like I said, decision makers at clubs just thinking a little bit more about what it is they're actually trying to achieve, and not necessarily just saying it needs to be faster. Because it's an interesting analogy you point out, or a point of history that you pointed out before, that back in the 70s, tournament golf that we were watching on television was around 9. Speed on the stimp meter, we're talking 9 or so. Now it's 14s. It's and that's a big difference. That you're talking 5 or 6 feet. That's a long way.
Yeah. No, look, as I said, technology is allowed of turf management skills and better mowers and better machines and turf varieties, all driven about we're getting these turf varieties that handle the heat and humidity and things like that to a certain level more than before, so you can take the grass a bit lower and do things with it. So, but I think it's just. It's almost like speed of greens is sort of the show-off factor, maybe around the sort of the golf clubs. But I think better clubs are sort of confident in their speeds of play and not making it ridiculously quick. And they said that, look, they might drop the speeds down for a club championship type time of the year, but the rest of the year, turf's a lot easier to look after when things are a little slightly longer and slightly less stress on the turf, obviously.
Indeed. Well, Harley, look, some great points of conversation. I think that will do us for this episode of and this segment of the Design Brief. It's been great to chat. Good to get an update of the work you're at. Good to have a bit of philosophical talk about some of the different points that clubs are got to think of, and with design and even just course setup and speed of the golf course. So it's great to chat to you about those things and pick your brains and your thoughts a little bit more. Exciting to see the work that you do in the future. We'll get some updates as time goes on, and might have you back again sooner rather than later to pick your brains about the broader things in golf as well, which is always good. So, Harley, Thank you very much for being on the podcast today. I appreciate your time as always.
Good on you, Steve. Good to chat, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. A great conversation once again with Harley Kruse from Kruse Golf, and I will mention, president of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects. I do love catching up with Harley. I do like to hear what work he's getting himself up to these days, and there's a plethora, as you heard. He's getting into some stuff right across the country. Very, very busy man. And look,
I was always wanting to try and get to a point where I could pin Harley down for a little while and have a conversation with him about a few of those other topics, speed of golf course and how golf course architecture sort of got to think about things in terms of the length that the golf ball is hit these days and small sites and older golf courses and revamping and all that sort of stuff. So, look, it was interesting to pick Harley's brains about it, get some of his thoughts about those the thought processes that architects go through during those sorts of projects and the like. And we know that there's all sorts of different projects happening around the country in Australia in regards to those similar types of topics. And look, there's plenty of discussion about the golf ball and distances the golf balls hit. So there's some of the things that we talked about, and I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you got a few things out of it. And look, I look forward to having Harley back. And one of the things that I think you're going to look forward to is that I'm going to be talking to other architects in the future as well. So that's something that I've really been working on in the background. I've got a few things that I'm bringing to the podcast that's going to be an improvement on information to you guys. And certainly things that hopefully you'll get more insight. The idea is, from my perspective, is to try and give you more insight into what goes on around the background and the evolution of delivering a golf course to you to go out there and play golf on. And that's part of the process. So talking to more architects, getting different ideas, different opinions, their insights and their mindset. I'm bringing back, as you might have seen on social media, we're able to bring back Keeper of the Greens. So I'm really excited about Keeper of the Greens coming back to you. I'll be announcing very soon a new sponsor that's partnering with the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast with me to bring that to you. Keeper of the Greens. We've got some great conversations coming up with some wonderful superintendents around the country. And again, we're going all over the country as far as I can think of, to all sorts of different places and far corners of this wonderful country of Australia of ours, and the different golf courses that we have available for you guys out there to play, to work on, to be part of, that you know, all sorts of different facets that you're involved with in golf. And look, there's other things as well coming to you. I've got a few more female voices I'm looking to bring in, a few more golf perspectives as well, and certainly the boardroom is going to have a few more additions to it. So there's plenty, and there's also Aussie golf history as well. I've got a couple of things that I've been researching over the last 12 months for that to bring to you. I've got to finish completing them and putting together. So there's plenty of content. There's so much I've been working on. Please like, share, subscribe. I want you to pass this around as much as you can. We want to get maximum exposure and bring as much information and insight to as many people in the golf community as we can. I appreciate your support so much, guys. Every single one of you out there that's taking something from this, that's enjoying and listening to the conversations, and certainly my thoughts and insights along the way, along with the people that I share their opinions and the interviews that I do with those experts along the way. So, and also the players, the people that I've interviewed too. So, as I said, I appreciate your support, guys. If you could leave me a comment, as always, I love hearing from people. I love chatting to people about it in the background. I've had another stack of comments and messages over the Easter break, which has been very, very nice to talk to people about different things and different ideas. And look, I look forward to bringing the next podcast to you very, very soon, guys. So as I finish off with, and every time I finish a podcast episode, you hit them clean, we'll keep them green. You have yourselves a great weekend.